Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. We want to respect your time, so we're going to get started. Really glad that you're able to be here. We have about the same number of people or so on Zoom. So David, if you don't mind hitting the next slide. So Kate and I are going to go through some updates. So normal ground rules for these events. This is both live and via Zoom. So we'll hand you a mic if you're going to ask questions so that we can include the folks in the audience. If the audience has any questions or comments or anything like that, you can feel free to either pipe in voice and we have a speaker in the room and we should be able to hear you, or you can just type in chat and David will relay your question or comment to the audience. So we'll go through our Civic League updates. Chris is here from Less Than to talk about his zero waste and refill shop right over there, just across Hampton Boulevard. And then Officer Dreer just pulled up. He's going to be giving us a crime data update for both the city and the area here. And then our Commonwealth attorney, Mr. Tahi, is here as well to be here to listen to residents' questions or concerns and talk about some of the topics that are important to him right now. So that's the game plan. All right, let's go to the next one. First one. Annie, do you want to talk? Let me hand you the mic. Annie Bird is here, our events coordinator.
Hi, everybody. This is so weird to talk into a microphone. I think I've seen most of you, but again, I'm Annie Bird. My husband and I live on Redgate. We have lived in West Ghent now for 4 years. And as I'm getting more involved in the community, I'm helping out with more of the events. And so our next one is the West Ghent Neighborhood Happy Hour this Tuesday at Grandi Flora. And if you don't know Grandi Flora, you will love it. It's a beautiful little wine garden in Chelsea. So hope to see you all there. The first 50 neighbors will enjoy their first glass of wine on us. We're also partnering with a lender who's footing the bill on some of that. So please come out and tell your neighbors and hope to see you all there.
Last few have been awesome, so we're looking forward to carrying some momentum, and we're really happy to be taking it to Grandi Flora with Jason and Aaron, and I think that it's a great business for the area. So hope to see you guys all there. All right, next one. Okay, so do you want me to run through the first couple here? Oh, okay, thanks. So our annual, which is quite a tradition, is our 4th of July bike parade is on the 4th at 11 a.m. Decorate your bikes, come out, put music on your bike, and we're gonna go the traditional route through the neighborhood in celebration of Independence Day. So it starts and finishes at Graydon Park, and we're gonna have popsicles there for all the kids that join us, or adults if you're so inclined. Yeah. We have our Adopt a Spot cleanup, our quarterly one on July 15th, right by Orapax restaurant there in the median between on the sides of Redgate. I've had a few communications, and then today a phone call with Mike Hopkins from Fairwinds Landing. He's going to give us a more detailed update. He gave me it kind of extemporaneously today on the phone. What I would tell you is that everything that we talked about, we're on plan, right? So the demolition for one of the old warehouse buildings has commenced. They're developing the internal site plan, and there's going to be a groundbreaking in, I think it's in July, for the Dominion Energy control center for the offshore wind farm that's going to be going off, right? And so not a whole lot to report there, but when he gets more detailed stuff, one thing he wanted me to express is that, like, the rubber company that is down there currently, that's been there historically, their lease has ended. So we're going to start seeing less and less truck traffic starting right about now through Chelsea and out of the neighborhood down there, in and out of the neighborhood. So I think that's a good news story for the neighborhood. And then after that is like Norfolk Oil. And then after that, so like basically by the new year, there should be a very noticeable reduction in truck traffic in Chelsea. There's one other tenant down there, and it's escaping me right now, but this will all be in the update. That's a little later. They're continuing operations, and as the development continues, then they're going to move on as well. We did have a conversation about, some of the commitments, the verbal commitments he's made about, for instance, when they're doing the pile driving for the seawall project, working during normal business hours and things like that. I'm confident that he is uh, um, being a neighbor and in good faith with us. I think he's reluctant to put anything in writing. He does have by right and by city ordinance, the ability to do pile driving until 10 PM. He's given us his verbal that if he's going to start doing pile driving after sunset or after normal working hours, he's going to communicate that with us in advance. And if we have issues with it and we want to push back on it, then our avenue would be, via the city council, and because it's a city ordinance on what time you can pile drive. There's some news that's come out the last few days. Many of you are familiar that the former Lambert's Point golf course was shut down. And then about 2/3 of that property was the city sold to the Hampton Roads Sanitation District. They're expanding the water treatment plant, but there's about a third-ish of that land that the city still owns. It's wonderful property. There's great views from up there. Those old cart paths are wonderful for, would be an awesome venue for bicycle or walking paths. It's something you don't get in Norfolk, other than like the bridges, is to get some elevation. So there's going to be, the city is hosting a forum of communities and other interested parties on July 19th from 6 until 8 PM in the former clubhouse there, to bring in ideas and to start the process of preliminarily planning for what is going to go into that property. So we'll get that out via our social media channels and the newsletter, so to get you all the details on that. But that just came out last night, that this is happening. So all right. And I'm going to turn this part over to Kate. So the concept here is we're taking a pause for the summer, right? June is the last meeting. July and August are off, and then we're back the third Thursday of September. And so we thought this, going into a pause of meetings, we thought it'd be a good opportunity to kind of recap some of the things that the Civic League has done this year.
I will keep it short, but we just wanted to kind of celebrate all of the amazing things that the Civic League and the residents of this community have done for, I went back basically June to June to really see what we have been up to. And so you can see on here, we've had lots of different events and neighborhood breakfast or bike parade, happy hours. That's something that we really listened to, and Annie, you've done an amazing job planning some epic happy hours. And so just some really festive things to bring people together and create community. Next slide, please.
Another big one. 9 meetings, right? And topic.
Oh, your microphone. I'll just say there's 9 meetings, and we want to try to connect y'all to as many organizations and city leaders that we can, but it's not possible with 9 meetings. So we decided to do the community open house, and we had 18 different businesses, organizations, city leaders, community leaders, and it was awesome. So we're planning on doing it again in January. And if you are interested, if you're business, community leader, organization, reach out to us and we can add you to the list. So next we wanted to talk about things we've done in the community to kind of give back. And during the holidays for Christmas, Hanukkah, we went ahead and did some collected cards and artwork that people in the neighborhood made and dropped off at the Signature Healthcare, which is right off of Hampton Boulevard and Westover. And they were very, very appreciative that we just took the time to think of them and drop those off. We did appreciation bags for NPD and Centera, our Adopt Spot cleanups, and then the Harbor Half Marathon, we always do the water station there.
My fault on the slide.
So, all right, next slide. Thank you. Oh, maybe back. Okay, so the only other thing was, as far as like in the neighborhood, we've done a lot of different things. I'm not going to be able to remember from memory, but street sign post painting. We have focused a lot on helping trying to figure out solutions to traffic issues in the neighborhood. It's not going to happen overnight, but talking to the transportation department and working on traffic calming measures on Redgate, stop signs around the neighborhood. There's a whole long list. So I'm
Yeah,
going to go.
shade structures at the parks are coming. We're in planning with the city.
It's a possibility,
Yeah.
but the city has basically taken on the shade structures for Redgate Park and over the swings at Taylor Elementary. They have already had 2 vendors out to do estimates. So that is like finally moving forward with the opportunity for us to hopefully get some shade structures there, whether it's completely covered cost-wise by the city or where they can cover a part, and then we have to figure out, fundraising for the other part. But at least that's progress moving forward. So I'll go ahead and include everything in the newsletter. It's going to be a recap coming out after this meeting because I didn't get it out the first of this month. So I will have all that information for you guys in the June newsletter. It's going to come out this weekend. And that will list really all the things. I'm kind of bummed that it's not there because there's so many accomplishments that our neighborhood, really all the volunteers have come together, and it's just West Ghent's a great place to live. And I just wanted you all to see everything that we've accomplished over the last year together. And we have an amazing board, and just thank you guys for your time, and thank you to the neighborhood for everything you guys do and for being involved.
Okay, so next I said I'd like to invite Chris up to talk about his store Less Than, and I just learned that he has stores in Richmond and Midlothian. So I'm learning more every day. So he's going to talk about Less Than.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Chris Simmons, and I'm the proprietor at Less Than. Less Than is a zero waste and refill shop. Our focus is helping people produce less waste and getting their needs met more sustainably. Today, I'll be talking about the company as well as ways that you can consume in a low waste manner. So our first location opened in Ghent off of Shirley Ave next to Little Stitch Studios in May of 2020. So we just celebrated our 3rd year anniversary. And since then, we've expanded to 6 locations. We're located in Virginia Beach, here in Ghent, downtown Hampton, Hilton Village in Newport News, the Fan District in Richmond, and most recently Midlothian. Less Than focuses on products that are package free or packaged sustainably. If something can be sold without packaging, then we bring it in that way so that we don't have unnecessary packaging. What does come in packaging is either recyclable, compostable, or biodegradable. Nothing we sell comes in plastic because plastic doesn't go away. And we've seen where people will kind of give you a timeline of the breakdown of plastic, and it's usually around 500 years for something like a water bottle. But what we found is that even in that degradation, the end result is microplastics, which never truly go away. Aside from our retail products, we have a refill station. In our refill station, we offer liquid and powder goods. This is available by the ounce in bulk containers. The idea here is that you can come in for, say, dish soap or laundry powder, and you can bring your own container, or you can use one of ours. Say, for example, you finish your Dawn dish soap, bring it right in, we'll weigh it, you fill it up with dish soap, and you're out the door. That way you can get your needs met without buying plastic anymore. We have containers on site. All of our containers are made of amber colored glass. The amber helps to keep the things that are inside the glass preserved longer. And glass is infinitely recyclable, so doesn't degrade as it's recycled over time. We even have free containers. We collect glass jars from the community. We sanitize them and we make them available for free in our refill station. And so you could conceivably come in empty-handed and leave with whatever it is that you need. We offer over 40 items in our refill station and over 300 retail products. We work with local makers whenever possible. For example, in Norfolk, we've contracted a seamstress to sew all of our sewn and cotton goods. And in this way, when you support Less Than, you're supporting hyper local. And that means when you spend your money with us, we spend it with people who live in the community, and they in turn spend their money in the community as well. Some of the things to look for, whether you're shopping at Less Than or someplace else, is natural versus synthetic ingredients. So we're often asked, how do our pricing compare to other businesses, usually big box stores? And in order to compare pricing, we really have to be talking about the same thing. So when it comes to the cheapest possible way to shop, it's going to be synthetic. It's going to be things that are made in a laboratory, things that you'll find manufactured in China and brought over. Things at the Dollar Tree is going to be the least expensive way to purchase. We deal in natural ingredients. The ingredients that go into the products are grown from the ground, extracted from essential oils or plants. Any scent that you see on the front of our labels are derived from that thing. So it's bergamot, it's lavender, it's, our ingredients. In addition to our ingredients being natural, the packaging again is natural. Nothing's positioned in plastic because plastic doesn't go away. There tends to be a lot of greenwashing that's happening now in big box stores. And what that means is big box stores will bring in brands that have a lot of green imagery on the front of their containers. They'll use words like natural or clean, but those terms really are not regulated. They have no substance beyond their use in the false advertising. At Less Than, the products are natural and the packaging is as clean as can be. Again, we look at products that are biodegradable and compostable. The reason why we do this is because we think worst case scenario. Let's say we have a lint brush that's made of bamboo that falls off the back of a trash truck versus a lint brush that's made of plastic with sticky roller. Eventually, our bamboo lint brush is going to degrade to nothing, and the plastic lint brush will be there forever. And so we're thinking of taking the responsibility away from the consumer and making it about what's the worst case scenario. And then we also focus on alternatives for single use. So single use are things that are intended to be used once and tossed. So for example, a Q-tip is typically used once and then tossed. A paper towel, you pull it off the roll, you clean your hands or you wipe up a spill and it's tossed. We have, for example, reusable cotton swabs. They're made from silicone ends. You just rinse and reuse. Rather than a single-use paper towel, we have reusable paper towels. It's made of cotton. It's made from a clingy material that you can still use it on your paper towel roll. You pull it off, you do what you need to do with it, and then you can wash it and reuse it again. And so those are some of the areas that we focus on. This is an example of our refill station where you're looking at bulk liquid goods. Some of the benefits of refilling. So one, you're not relying on plastic in order to get your needs met. Each time that we purchase plastic and we throw it in a recycling bin, we hope that that's what's happening with it. The data out of the recycling centers is telling us that it's not happening. Last year, less than 10% of recycling was recycled. And so it's just broken. And I think at this point, most of us are relying on the sensation that we get, the feeling that we get when we open the blue lid and toss something in. But what's actually happening is not, what should happen is not happening. And we're finding at our locations that people are coming in and saying that the city is taking away the recycling program, and they're hoping that a private company will come in and take it over. So that's been an issue that we've seen lately. If you do have plastic in your home, you're able to bring it in. We have no trouble filling it. And in doing so, you extend the life of it. So this, Dawn dish soap bottle that you purchased could conceivably be used for years. We had a guest that came in not too long ago that visited us when we first opened, and shampoo bottle, conditioner bottle, and a dish soap bottle, all plastic, that she's been using for the past 3 years, which is great because it's not ending up in a landfill now. In using the refill station, you begin to offset what it is that you're bringing in or what it is that you've already purchased. So for example, we get a lot of kombucha bottles that are donated to us. We sanitize it, we make it available. It's great for holding liquids. And studies show that by the 7th time that you've used a glass container, you've offset the production, the energy that went into production. And then by the 9th time that you've used it, you've offset the carbon process that went behind it. So by 9 refills, it's like the glass was never made. And so that's a big part of what we do that's maybe not talked a lot about, but you know, imagine being a manufacturer in the kombucha industry and you create this bottle and you hope it gets recycled, but it's not getting recycled. And then you later find out that someone in the community is collecting it and offsetting your entire production process. We think it's amazing, and it's one of the things that we're proud of. And in shopping in our refill station, there's more transparency behind what it is that you're purchasing. If you look at the picture, you'll see a lot of the bottles, the contents of the bottles, they all look similar. And that's because this is the color, the end product. We don't add, artificial coloring. We don't add stabilizers, brighteners, whiteners, a lot of the things that are added to products to make them shelf stable for years and years and years. We don't need it because we manufacture it, we bring it in, we go through it, and we start the process over. So in shopping in a refill station, it's probably as clean as you can get unless you're making the products at home yourself. This is something that came to light recently. In one way that we determine what's been happening with COVID over the past few years is testing the water systems. It's also a way to check for outbreaks in different states and cities. Here, the state of New York ended up banning a lot of laundry detergents that most people have in their home because of a high level of 1,4-dioxane. 1,4-dioxane is not an ingredient that a person or a manufacturer puts into a product intentionally. It's a byproduct of things coming together and being heated up at a certain process. And this is what happens when you're dealing with synthetic ingredients. And what they found, you can see from the chart how high the levels are. So in New York, for these companies to continue to sell to New York, they have to reformulate and they have a deadline to do so. This is a non-issue for our laundry detergent because we don't rely on those ingredients to produce our products. We work in closed loop system. So what this means is we might get laundry powder in that pail bucket. It's just comes to us in a cardboard shipping box. We open the box, we distribute the powder into our refill stations. And then once we're done, we put the lid back on that same bucket. We close that box back up. We use a piece of water activated tape. It's tape made from paper. And we put a return label on it. It goes back to our maker and they sanitize it and reuse it. In this method of practice, we are not relying on recycling. We're not relying on landfills, and we're not passing on the burden to the consumer to figure out what to do with the waste afterwards. This is another area that we're proud of. This is something that's difficult for big box stores to subscribe to. Their model is more of take resources, make the product, and then it goes to waste. So one thing I like to leave people with is, just some general ideas about when purchasing and how to consume, because we understand, for example, we're not in the food section of things, we're on the non-food side. And so everyone here is going to a grocery store to pick up something. But when you go out and get your needs met, some things to think about are you sourcing products with natural ingredients or synthetic ingredients? Are you shopping local? And shopping local doesn't necessarily mean shopping at a big box store within your city. Shopping local means shopping with companies that are registered in your cities. The ownership is in your city or in your state. A lot of times companies will come to the area and use tax breaks to set up their shop essentially and not give back to the community. When you shop at a small business like Less Than, the money stays local, it's invested locally, and we live locally. When you shop at Amazon or our larger big box store, they're not paying taxes. And so Less Than paid more in taxes last year than Amazon, which is mind blowing. Are you prioritizing non-plastic packaging? So if there's an option to buy, say, your produce without a bag, did you bring your own bag? So you can just pop them in there and take them to the register. If you're purchasing online, are you requesting plastic-free shipping? When we ship throughout the US, we wrap everything in paper. We reuse the boxes that we get throughout the course of our business, and we reuse the paper as well. So no new material is used in shipping and no plastic is used in shipping. Are you thinking about the life cycle of the product? When I go out into the world and make purchases, I think about, if I bring this home, what will I do with it when it's done? How long will it last? How do I get rid of it properly? And I think if we think about that when we're making purchases, it will help to shape the products that we decide to bring in. And are you conscious of what you're doing with your waste? So if you know that recycling is broken, if you have clean jars, they're not liquor bottles, they're not wine bottles, they have a lid that secures, they don't smell bad, bring them into a shop like Less Than, and we'll collect them and sanitize them and begin offsetting them for you. And one quick thing before we get into Q&A, if there's any questions. About a year ago, we launched another concept called Ceremony. Ceremony is a non-alcohol bottle shop. And what we do with Ceremony is we curate non-alcohol beer, wine, spirits, bitters, mixers, and mocktails. And this for us is an extension of living intentionally for people who want to celebrate, enjoy an elevated drink, but they don't want high fructose corn syrup. They don't want, sweet tea and things like that. And so that's something that's new for us. We just celebrated a year and we've rolled that out in each of our locations. And hopefully we'll be bringing that more into the community through events and fingers crossed, a non-alcohol bar. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question. Is the detergent, the laundry detergent, does it get stains out well?
It does.
Because I'm
yeah.
thinking I should probably get a different detergent, but does it remove stains?
Yeah, so it does. So one of the good things when you don't have stabilizers, the type of preservatives that are needed for multi-year shelf stabilization, brighteners, whiteners, and all that, when you take those out, you take the water out that you're using to cut and make a higher profit, you end up with a higher concentration. And so when you're shopping at Less Than, you'll want to take a look at the front of the label. We give you instructions on how to use it, and it's because the product is more concentrated. So you're using less of it, which ends up being less financially in the long run, but it's concentrated, so it's.
Thank you.
We're open.
Store hours.
Yeah, so we're open 11 to 7, Tuesday through Saturday. Sunday is our short day, it's 12 to 5, and we take a break on Mondays.
Well, thank you. I'm impressed with your presentation too. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, well done. Well done. Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to invite Officer Greer up. You guys should all be familiar with. You'll all be familiar with Officer Dreher. He's our community resource officer here. And we have a great relationship with him. And he's going to come up and talk about statistics. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. So first, before I jump into that, I'm going to give you the crime stats from May 18th through today's date, the 15th of 2023. Over here in West Ghent, we had 2 larcenies from auto. Both of them were on 5/20. They were both in the daytime. We had 1 residential burg. I apologize, the larcenies from auto, I didn't grab the address where it occurred at. Excuse me. We had 1 residential burg in a 900 block of Westover. It was on June 7th, and that was early morning. We had 1 larceny of a bicycle on May 25th, an 1100 block of Redgate, and we had 1 commercial robbery over here on Redgate, 7-Eleven on May 26th. That was 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's the last 30 days of crime stats. Moving on, I had our lovely crime analyst person kind of pull this up for me and throw it together. Just the West Ghent Civic League. This is the last 6 months with current month-to-date crime stats. You can read the dates from the 22nd of December, or I'm sorry, 2022 through May of this year. And then month-to-date, June 1st through 14th of this year. 6-month trend charts, violent crime, property crime, total crime, year-to-date stats. And this is a 5-year year-to-date trend with some charts of the same violent crime, property crime, and total crime. Might be hard to read. In the last 6 months, the crime stats pretty good up here. Homicide rates 0. One robbery. Obviously, I just told you I had to go back and dig. It was a robbery at the 7-Eleven over here on Redgate. Down. No shooting and occupied, no ag assaults, no domestics, no all other ag assaults. And one violent crime. Burglaries. Go ahead. Yeah.
For those of you that have been, been involved and paying close attention, like last summer, we had a really big spike here in the neighborhood. Like we had an aggravated assault, we had several larcenies. We had a really large string of larcenies in auto and stolen vehicles. And we got together and we talked about what to do about it, right? And it wasn't like go storm the Capitol. It was like hang out on your porch and talk with your neighbors and be present, right? And that's what we did notice we see people doing in the neighborhood. I also want to say that thanks to their help, right, we kept the message pretty laser focused, and our focus in the last year as a Civic League was don't leave your guns in your car. And we've done pretty well.
Right.
We don't have great numbers due to some confidentiality stuff like previous years, but I have it on good authority that we're doing much better in the neighborhood with stolen firearms from vehicles. I think we're still at 0.
Yes.
And I would love to see that continue because those weapons are being used in crimes, not only in the city, but in the surrounding areas. And so the other thing that I want to emphasize that contributed to these numbers this year was the virtual neighborhood watch. So if you have a security camera at your house, if you have a Ring camera, if you have security cameras and they're going to some sort of a web feed, you register the fact that you have that on a database with the city, and then they know that there's a camera at this location. If something happens, the police will email you and say, would you mind if we took a look at your footage from this time to that time? And you can turn it over or not turn it over. And that contributes to their ability to investigate.
Appreciate it. Yeah, go back. We had that one burglary that was just recent. And then obviously the larcenies that kind of hover out in March, kind of climb in March, February were low. Like Scott said, this past, what was it, early fall, like the end of summer, fall. We had a pretty big ring of individuals going around and committing robberies and larcenies from auto, and follow up with even worse violent crimes throughout the city. We kind of locked up the majority of those folks. So we had the total property crimes for May, it was 3 total. So. Yeah.
So what's the difference between robbery and burglary?
A robbery and a burglary.
Yeah, what's the difference?
Ramin, welcome.
Sure. The Virginia answer is that a robbery is taking somebody's property by force or threat from their person. A burglary is breaking into a building to commit a crime, and it could be an assault, it could be a larceny, it could be a robbery, it could be a rape. So burglary is tied to a building. A robbery is theft plus threats or violence to a human being.
I couldn't have said it any better. So this here is a year-to-date total violent crime. Again, looking good from December to June. We just had that one in May.
Yeah, and it's compared, I mean,
7-11.
we don't have year over year information here, right, on this, right?
We do have a 5-year,
Yeah,
not on this one. Next. Last 6 months, total property crime. You see December, January, kind of even, February dipped a little bit, March spiked.
no, this
This
is,
is West Ghent. West Ghent.
and then I think the interesting one will be if we forward to the kind of overtime
Mhm.
stuff.
Five
Yeah,
years. Next. This is total crimes. Next. Now this is this year, 2023, January 1 to June 14th.
similar to that, and it's barely different than the other ones.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the 5-year. I'm sorry, 19, 20, 21,
Okay, yeah.
22, and 23.
Yeah, so, you can see, I mean, what I was looking at when I was looking at this is like, this time last year, right, we were at total property crime of 49, we're at 34.
Yeah.
We were at 52 for total crime, we're at 36. And so, we're not going to celebrate anything quite yet because there seems to be, as the weather heats up, the crime heats up.
Mhm.
But we are overall doing better
Right.
as a neighborhood crime wise. And you can tell even relative to previous years, it's we're almost back to kind of normal from last year's spike.
Next. It's the 5-year, January 1 through June 14th. Total violent crime. Next. Property crimes, 5-year trend. Next. Year-to-date total crime, 5-year trend.
One thing I want to mention while you're looking at the data, that kind of the relationship between the Civic League and Officer Dreer, and to a lesser extent, Lieutenant Lawton
Mhm.
Locker, right?
Correct.
Is we keep an eye on, like, because we get the crime updates like daily from a web feed that the city runs. If something is not even in West Ghent, but close by, and it seems like it would be concerning, we normally will text Chuck and say, hey, when the dust settles, can you give us some information about what happened? Is this potentially something that would, potentially, be a threat or of any kind? And then that's how we kind of work out understanding at a slightly deeper level. Like, we have to, we bridge the confidentiality things, and he has to kind of water most of the stuff down, but it gives us a good sense of like the details that you're not going to see on the crime blotter of
Mhm.
what's going on in the neighborhood. So that's kind of what we do. So if you have questions, my bottom line is reach out to us, and then or you can reach out to Officer Dreer directly. His phone is a busy place.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But we have a great relationship, and I just want to say I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you too. Next. Maybe total crime, 5-year trend, total crime, January 1 through June 14th. That may be it.
Yeah.
Sure. I didn't memorize it.
Yeah,
All right, that's it. Like Scott said, I mean, we're anticipating school's out now. Kids don't have somewhere to go for 8 hours a day, so we're gonna anticipate this spike to kind of climb back up for the summertime, and we'll see certain specific incidences happen throughout the city. So
one thing that I will say, that another takeaway that I've learned as just being involved through Officer Dreer is, if you like, the importance of not confronting somebody that you think is suspicious in the neighborhood. Like there's a difference between notifying NPD and in any way confronting somebody. The incidences we've had where guns have been brandished in the neighborhood and things like that, almost invariably those involved some form of confrontation between a resident and someone perpetrating a crime. And so, and then obviously more of a crime,
Mhm.
right? So the advice has always been contact NPD, you know, give as much information as you can and allow the police to do their work so that things don't go from property crime to violence.
Correct. Yeah, try to be the best witness you can for us. We are coming. It might seem like we're super slow. We know residents are dealing with some frustrations with getting through to our dispatchers and, you know, we're battling that on a different end. But just try to be patient with us. We are coming. Just try to be, you know, the best witness you can be. Don't confront these individuals that are out here committing these crimes. All right.
Do you have any tips or suggestions since you're saying things are gonna, you know, will most likely uptick for people to know, like things we should do?
Yeah, I mean, we're still seeing the sorts of crimes that happened last year and even recent months past. You know, if you have contractors out here that are doing work on your houses, I know summertime's a good time to get renovations done or get things updated or whatever, get work done. Have them lock their doors. I mean, I've had it done in my house in Virginia Beach where he's a personal friend of mine and he had all his stuff open and just, you know, thousands of dollars worth of tools, envelopes with cash money in the, you know, in the glove box, center console. And I just had to remind them, just lock your doors because they're looking for opportunities, you know, opportunists. Criminals are opportunists. They're looking for the easy target, you know, whether it's a purse left in a car out in the open or laptop bag or briefcase or whatever, you know, just keep it out of sight, out of mind, get them moving on. So that kind of answer your question.
Yeah, that's good. And-
Firearms, please. If you know anybody that keeps firearms in a car, bring it inside, lock it up. Yeah, be responsible with them. I'm sure I've told you guys before, keep your cars like you drove them off the lot. Brand new, nothing inside. I know we all get complacent, myself included. Try to keep it hidden. Yeah, lots of, yeah, I mean, gallon jugs. Yeah. But yeah, just try to keep it clear. If they don't see it, if you got tint, you know, that kind of helps with them viewing stuff inside the car. But if they see nothing that's up, you know, an opportunity to break in the car and take, and they'll just keep moving. Unfortunately, we've seen it where some folks go as low as taking the change out of your, you know, the cup holder. So can't tell you to take your change out, but I mean, that's up to you. But yeah, just please be the best witness you can and just don't confront these individuals. From what we've seen in the past, they will rise up to a violent criminal. So yes.
One more question. And for the burglary, was that just easy access to something that was open, or did they?
Not necessarily open. It was a window unit, the AC unit. Yeah, lady went to work at 7, came back, and in the evening time, her room was ransacked. So she stepped back, went back outside, called the police. We came, kind of did the initial walkthrough with our canine. Found some items missing, but realized that's probably how they got in, was through the rear window AC unit.
Can those be
taken out.
secured? Do you know? Like, can they be? If you have window units, is there like locks for them or something so they can?
I'm not sure. I mean, you could probably get a contractor to put like a couple screws in it and keep it secured. But yeah, I'm not sure if there's a locking mechanism actually made for it like that. Yep. Yeah.
So before I ask the Commonwealth attorney to come up, one thing I wanted to just talk about is it's not crime, but it's related and it's kind of government, you know, enforcement of things, right? So we've had several conversations over the course of the last few weeks regarding code enforcement in the neighborhood. You might, you know, we certainly have seen because we've been cued to it, but the numbers in the code enforcement department with the city have basically doubled in the last year. And I think you're gonna see a difference in the amount of presence for code enforcement and the amount of, like, I wouldn't say the word aggressive is the right one, but there's more activity going on code enforcement wise. If you're having issues with code enforcement, we have an ongoing conversation on this topic with city council, with the appropriate departments, with the city. So if you're having frustrations related to code enforcement, please let us know. I would really like to know the total picture for the neighborhood and try to convey that in one consolidated way to the city as we try to work through to get a greater sense of accountability for, the floor, the minimum standards for maintaining your home, right? And we're not like the burbs or anything like that, right? Like it's just the minimum standards, the codes for the city or the state. So I'll leave it at that. And then now I'd like to invite Ramin Fatehi up, our Commonwealth attorney. So this one is, he reached out several months ago, very proactive with the dates for our Civic League meetings. And he's been looking for an opportunity to get with us, to get with the neighborhood. He's trying to get around the whole city. He's doing many Civic Leagues. And I'm glad you're able to come join us tonight. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it, man. The evening, everybody. Great to be here in West Ghent. I got a little actually emotional walking in here because 7 days ago I watched my little boy graduate from kindergarten here. My sons Thomas and James, they're a rising second grader and rising first grader at Norfolk Academy, but they both started out as 2-year-olds here. And so Miss Riley and St. Andrews and West Ghent in general have a really special place, and Mary Beth's in my heart. My wife's in my heart. So nice to be back. Invite me often so I can remember my kids when they're this big. I am Ramin Fatehi. I'm your Commonwealth's attorney. That makes me the Chief Minister of Justice for the city, the Chief Prosecutor. I have had the privilege of serving you as Commonwealth's attorney since January of 2022, which means I'm coming up on, at the end of this month, 18 months of my 4-year term. I am not a Norfolk native, though I am Norfolk adjacent. I grew up in Tehran until I was 7, moved to the US, and my mom and dad settled in Virginia Beach. My father's a retired neurosurgeon, my mother's a retired nurse. I grew up in Princess Anne Hills in Bay Colony, attended Norfolk Academy for 10 years, as did my younger brother. I was fortunate in being admitted to Yale, where I majored in history, and then went on to Columbia Law School, where I was this past weekend for my 20th law school reunion. I say this not to brag, but to recognize the fact that I made one excellent decision in life. I picked the right parents. The Almighty said, "Do you want good parents or bad parents?" I said, "You know what? All things being equal, I'll take good parents." And the fact that I had an involved mother and father, somebody who cared about me, somebody who invested in my education, somebody who was there to catch me when I did things that might get the police involved, and help me resolve those things. Left a cushion for teenage errors. All of those things were things that I've been very fortunate to have, and things that I did not either earn or choose. I sort of grew up like a lot of wealthy kids with the idea of meritocracy, that if you work hard and you play by the rules, you will advance as far as your abilities will take you. That is a laudable idea in a vacuum. It is not the reality in which we live. Our wealth, our parents, our zip code, our race, our parentage, whether we are mentally ill or not, whether we are simply unlucky, has an incredible bearing on our trajectory in life. And as I became more aware of that, I became ever more grateful for my own advantages. I also became ever more upset and critical of the ways that we as a nation, one where there is a reason that my father is a naturalized American, why people are beating a path to our door. It is because we are the greatest nation in the world. But the way that we as a nation have a gap between our ideals and our lived realities. And I went into the law to serve people, just like my parents served people. I I clerked for Justice Elizabeth Lacey, the first woman on the Virginia Supreme Court, after graduating. I served briefly and unhappily at a law firm in Washington. I was one of the 200 in DC and one of the 1,000 in the firm. I walked away from it and became a public defender in the city of Richmond, where I served people who earned under $14,000 a year. That was the cutoff to qualify for my services. And most importantly, I served children. And I recognized in the children sitting across the table from me in the juvenile detention homes in Richmond, myself. And myself shorn of my advantages and shorn of my good luck. And recognized that they were just as smart as I was. They were just as capable as I was. They had my flaws too. They just didn't pick the right parents. All that said, I'm coming up now on 17 years as a prosecutor. And the reason that I chose to prosecute was for a few things. The first is that in many ways, as noble and laudable as defense work is, the system is not stacked in the defendant's favor. The system is stacked with a lot of the power in the court system in the hands of prosecutors. And I became very frustrated at watching both nails and ants get the hammer from prosecutors in Richmond who were doing their best. They were using the tools available to them during an era when the consensus across the political spectrum was that if a ton of bricks was sufficient, 2 tons was twice as effective, and who were not able to recognize that justice, in the words of the United States Code, is imposing a sanction sufficient but no greater than necessary to vindicate the public interest. So I came back down to Tidewater, took a job in the city of Chesapeake, worked there for 4 years, a year and a half in the United States Attorney's Office in Charlottesville. I'll be in Scottsville this weekend, maybe tubing. And then back here to Norfolk in 2012, where I rose through the ranks and eventually ran for office. The platform on which I ran, it was one of a progressive prosecutor, a reform prosecutor. That, if you watch Fox News, there's a certain sort of unfactual narrative that goes along with those titles. But what they are in reality and what it has meant to me is what you might have seen in some of the mail that you saw a couple of years ago. It was acknowledging that there are 2 systems of justice, which in a deep irony, Governor Youngkin invoked for the indictment of President Trump. In fact, those exact words, that our parentage, our race, and our income has bearing on the brand of justice that we get. And that especially in the neighborhoods where those 6-month statistics would be 1-week statistics, all within a relatively short bike ride from here, that there is a deep resentment of the justice system. The one born not of the work that Chuck Dreer is doing, not of the work that I'm doing, but of centuries of unequal treatment. And that the first way to address this problem, which is not just a moral one, it's a practical one for a reason that I'll get into, is to acknowledge that these problems existed and then to show our work, me particularly as a prosecutor, to say that who's your daddy isn't going to influence what your brand of justice is. The retainer that you paid your lawyer is not going to influence your brand of justice. What you did as an individual, who you harmed as an individual, what your ability to reform is, what your future dangerousness is, whether that is from malice or from factors outside of your control, and to fit a sanction where appropriate, to offer mercy and diversion where appropriate. This has both practical and moral implications. The practical implication is this: those neighborhoods where people think that prosecutors are, to use the words of an elected official who spoke to me recently, that the system is really bad at locking up Black men for committing murder, but really good at locking up Black men for making money. That is, for committing drug offenses. So we are not operating in that mold. That we are looking to be fair, and not just say that we're being fair, but actually be fair. And in those neighborhoods, that sense that we are not doing that is why you see murder case null pros. Murder happens in front of multiple people, no witnesses available. The witness fails to appear in court. It is because people don't trust the system to deliver justice, and they engage in what my criminal law professor liked to call self-help remedies, also known as retaliatory violence, that makes us all less safe. And again, apart from the practical, there is the moral. That's why I did what I did when I ran for office. What did I do when I came in, and what am I looking to do, and what am I asking for your help in? So when I came into office, I had a lot of sort of practical ideas. And one of the first ones was that I took my 90 employees. I run, by the way, depending on the day, my 39 prosecutors are roughly the 5th largest of the 120 prosecutors' offices in Virginia. So 39 lawyers, roughly 55, 56 staff between victim witness advocates, paralegals, secretaries, and the like. I made 60 of those people move their offices. And I lived, all my tires were intact at the end of the day. But I made them move because I fundamentally restructured the way that my office worked. Because one of the things that I saw in my 16 years here was that the system that was in place, for example, in the early to mid 2000s, a couple of Commonwealth's attorneys ago, was antiquated. We had murder prosecutors, drug prosecutors, property crime prosecutors. And what that meant is we had tactical thinkers rather than strategic thinkers. Everybody know what sent Al Capone to prison? Correct, tax evasion. Exactly, not being a gangster. The system that we had in place before I took office did not encourage or reward people to look at a criminal defendant, a neighborhood, or a gang of people. The gang that Chuck Dreer mentioned, by the way, I have 3 prosecutors out of my office who are specifically following those guys. And we are watching them and dealing with them as a group. Under the old system, that never happened. Everybody dealt with a single case. So when Al Capone came in for tax evasion, people treated it like a paper case and not like a gangster case. My office is currently structured on a model that I borrowed from Virginia Beach, where we have a juvenile division where we treat children as children. I have sent, by the way, no children to adult prison since I took office. That doesn't mean they're not being held accountable. The young man who brought a gun to Granby High School is going to be sentenced tomorrow, very likely to be committed, though it will be ultimately in the hands of a judge. But children are different, and I've been able to treat children as children. And then I have 2 precinct divisions in my office that mirror the command structure and the geographical structure of the Norfolk Police Department. We have a 1st police precinct, which is where we find ourselves here, and then a 2nd police precinct that runs roughly in the northern side of the city. I reassigned, or I redid the responsibilities of my lawyers. My chief deputy remains my executive officer. My deputy Commonwealth's attorneys traditionally in our offices were trial lawyers. Mine will try a couple of major murder cases a year, but other than that, they are criminal intelligence clearinghouses and specialists, trainers of younger lawyers and supervisors. And every morning, they and I get the Detective Division police reports from the Norfolk Police, read through them, and when arrests are made and are assigned by precinct, the deputies hand assign and subassign those cases to my line prosecutors with an eye towards, is something going on in a particular neighborhood? Have we seen this defendant before? Have we prosecuted this defendant before? Is there a particular class of crime that is coming up? So that we can engage in targeted accountability, targeted prosecution, rather than the carpet bombing tactics, broad spectrum antibiotics, whatever analog you would like to use, whatever metaphor, that produced what we call mass incarceration. So to ensure that the ton of bricks goes where a ton belongs and not where it doesn't. I've been very pleased with the progress of this work. Very early in my tenure, there was a very high profile murder that's currently pending of a retired Norfolk police officer. One of my lawyers, having paid attention to what was going on, was able to produce jail video of one of the individuals holding the murder weapon 2 weeks prior to the murder, and was able to produce it to the Norfolk Police Department because they were thinking strategically and paying attention. The other things that I have done are a lot of them are under the hood and under the radar. Obviously, I am a big believer in transparency. I'm one of the few prosecutors you will ever see who regularly agrees to speak to the press, and they usually call when something's going awry. But we have a lot to be proud of in my office during a very difficult 2022, as you saw. If you want to know all of my policies, I could keep you here even longer than we could possibly talk about reducing our carbon footprint. But you're welcome to go to my website, and Scott, I will share my website with everybody. It's unfortunately not easily recitable, but you scroll down to the bottom, you can look at policies. And if you click on there, I borrowed something from my time with the Justice Department. My plea agreement policies, philosophies, and procedures are nearly 11 pages single spaced, and they're there for everyone to read so that everybody knows what my policies are. Some of those things that I consider to be real successes are reducing not just mass incarceration by saying we will not mechanically apply mandatory minimums. We will look at what sentence a person deserves. If it's above the mandatory minimum, then the mandatory is irrelevant. If it's below the mandatory minimum, then we are derelict in our duty in applying it mechanically. Incidentally, to give you an idea about mandatories, the use of a firearm in the commission of an attempted robbery carries a mandatory sentence. What does not carry a mandatory sentence? Murder, or for that matter, robbery. To give you an idea of the absurdities in the code that deal with mandatory minimums and how they are really irrelevant when we're talking about serious offenses. I have reduced the handmaiden of mass incarceration, which is mass supervision. One of the discredited ideas, and this is not just me talking. If you look at the Brennan Center for Justice, if you look at John Jay College, if you look at criminologists, is the idea that supervision will, beyond a certain amount of time or for certain particular characteristics, is actually going to reduce crime. Often it does not. One of the classic examples is with substance use disorder. The statistics bear out that as a general proposition, people on criminal justice supervision do not get clean, do not cease overdosing, do not relapse, at any rate statistically different from people not under criminal justice supervision. So one of the things in my 11 pages is do not put people on supervision simply for having a substance use disorder. And in fact, don't felonize them, because possession of $10 of your buddy's Adderall in Virginia is a felony, which will permanently disenfranchise you under a governor who stopped restoring people's rights. That same person, if they have a string of burglaries in their past, or they have robberies, or they have 3 strangulations, or domestic assaults that were null prost, that person will wind up on supervision because they're a threat to public safety. And that is what my policy calls for. We have also been able to take very limited resources of our own and of the Norfolk Police Departments and direct them towards violence, laser focused on violence. Chuck can tell you, I don't know if you were at one of the roll calls I went to, Chuck. I went to 23 in a single week, 3 evenings, 3 mornings. And the only reason I didn't go to 24 is I was so addled by the end of it that I went to the wrong precinct house. But I spoke to the police department and said, I want you to look at my policies, recognize that the work that I'm doing, especially when Norfolk Police was down 250 officers, was designed to separate the wheat from the chaff in the courthouse. Because every case that Chuck Dreer is sitting in court on when he's worked overnights, where it didn't need to go to trial because there was a reasonable and just compromise to be found, was hours when Chuck couldn't sleep, Chuck couldn't play with his children, and Chuck couldn't be out making other arrests. So it was an effort to try and work smarter and also to use my people's man hours. This is a tough place to prosecute. It's a tough place to police. We are busy. The the annexation wars of the 1950s that a lot of us have vivid memories of from either studying it or from hearing about it around the dinner table, mean that we have concentrated poverty in Norfolk. And the single biggest driver of crime is not overall poverty, it's concentrated poverty. In fact, one of the, for all of its flaws, the single biggest crime prevention initiative happening in Norfolk today is the St. Paul's Redevelopment Project. The overall goal, obviously, as Americans, is to reduce poverty overall. But if you reduce poverty's concentration, that will reduce crime. We have tried, since I took office, 77 jury trials. It would have been 78 this morning, but for the fact that we didn't have enough jurors show up. We opened 4,000 files last year, roughly 2,400 felonies and 1,600 misdemeanors. And we did all of that in an environment where we were being mercilessly poached in the same way that the Norfolk Police Department was, due to, believe it or not, a national lawyer shortage. The American law schools graduated roughly 20% fewer lawyers between 2013 and 2022 as they had done in 2012 and years prior. And in an environment where out of my 39 lawyers, 28 of them do not make six figures. The starting salary difference between a Norfolk police officer and my prosecutors is $17,000. There was obviously a lot of press attention on the increase in violence in Norfolk. And there's regrettably not been as much of a focus on the decrease in violence in Norfolk since this calendar year has begun. But part of what made last year a tough year was that increase. And if we look at the numbers, Norfolk's crime numbers kind of were like Norfolk's property value numbers. We were lagging the country by about a year. So what we saw is that two very big factors in the last few years led to a nationwide increase in not crime, but in violence, specifically in violence. COVID and guns. Those two things meant that, for example, the two states that saw the largest percentage increase in their homicides during the COVID era were Wyoming and South Dakota. The largest percentage increase in homicides in the United States happened in, this is FBI crime data, happened in cities with between 25 and 100,000 residents. 30 years ago, 14% of the homicides in the United States happened either in New York or Los Angeles. It is now 4%. So we've seen overall trends that have produced greater violence, and red states, blue states, red cities, blue cities. And the reason that we can point with some confidence to COVID as being the factor in that is that the crimes that we saw the increases in were basically the crimes where people didn't know how to act around one another anymore. So it was not just shootings, not just domestic assaults, which went up by almost a fifth. It was triple-digit driving. It was road rage shootings, which saw an all-time high in Texas during the COVID era. It was any crime where disinhibition, social anxiety, material insecurity were going to be a driver. By the way, you know what fell 30% during COVID? Residential burglaries. I don't know why. Work from home. The spike that we saw in Norfolk, thankfully, has begun to abate. And there was a lot of, I think very justifiable concern that what's going on here? Are the police doing something wrong? Am I doing something wrong? Somebody else doing something wrong? Is code enforcement doing the wrong thing? Rezoning the wrong properties? But this was an everywhere problem. And thankfully, believe it or not, one of the great places to look for this data is the Atlantic Monthly. Within the last week, the Atlantic Monthly was able to gather relatively real-time calendar year 2023 data and was able to demonstrate that there has been a roughly 20% decrease in homicides in the major cities putting out their data. It was, I think it was something like 32 of 35 cities, one of the notable exceptions being Memphis, where in accordance with the academic literature, we see that a high-profile incidence of a police shooting or a police use of force will often result in an increase in violence afterwards. But the single biggest drop year to year in homicides that anybody could record was in process in 2023. Now, Scott, everything that I have in the wrap up of my canned speech about what you all need to do to help make this a better world and make us more safe, you've already covered. You know, Chuck covered whatever you had, whatever you left on the table. But the decrease that we are seeing will have an increase. You know, I don't remember if you mentioned it. I'm bad. Okay, Kate, I don't know if you said it, the weather's warming up, things are coming. The Channel 13 actually asked me to go on TV and talk about the decrease in Q1 crime in Norfolk, and that's precisely what I said. You know, for the very same reason. You know, ever since Cain and Abel, once the weather gets warm, crime numbers will go up. So we don't know what's going to happen in the long run here in Norfolk over the course of this year, but the trajectory at least looks good. And I will, by the way, give credit to the Norfolk Police Department because they ran absolutely ragged last year. I go to every homicide scene in Norfolk, unless I'm out of town. I didn't become a doctor because my dad was on call 24 hours a day, and we're just doomed to repeat our parents' errors. So now I'm on call 24 hours a day, and I go out and I see Chuck and I see Sergeant Jarvis and Sergeant Mitchell and everybody day or night. I can tell you they were in bad shape last year. So they were trying to run from call to look out for everybody, and they were sacrificing their own health and their own bodies to do it. And they managed to ride the storm out. And the police department is engaging in some very smart criminal intelligence and resource allocation to be able to do more with the officers that they have right now. You know, and that, so there is some credit that we have to recognize there, actually a lot of credit for the work that NPD is doing. I know you all have a limited amount of time, so if you'll allow me, I'm going to talk a couple more minutes about the things, if I have it, about the immense power I have and then the limits to my power. So the things that I wish I could do that I cannot. And then, you know, a little bit of just begging and pleading for help from y'all. So a lot of people, either who moved from out of state, or folks who are educated lay people, but not lawyers, or for that matter, not criminal lawyers, have a certain conception of how the legal system works. You know, and whether that's to the good from Law and Order or from The Wire, or whether it's to the bad from Serial and, you know, the stories of DNA exonerations and rampant Brady violations. They think that there are certain things, at least that Virginia prosecutors can do that we cannot. If you ever hear somebody say, this guy got arrested and the next morning he was out on the street because of the prosecutor, that's legally impossible. Because of certain limitations in the way that Virginia prosecutors' powers are set out. I just hired a prosecutor from Wichita, Kansas. She started last week in my office, and she was absolutely appalled because she found out I don't have an intake division. In most states of the Union, when a police officer arrests somebody, takes them to jail, within a certain amount of time, they have to take that individual before a prosecutor, who then weighs the evidence, decides not just whether there is probable cause, which is the standard for an arrest, which is defined as not even 50%, but is there a reasonable prospect of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which the jury instructions, if you're ever jurors, says means excluding every reasonable theory of innocence. Every reasonable theory, whether argued or not, by the way. We don't have that power in Virginia. In Virginia, we have a group of quasi-judicial officials called magistrates. And magistrates are the ones who get the call at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning when somebody gets arrested. They determine what those initial charges are. And their portfolio is to look only at probable cause and only at the credibility of the person making the presentation to them. So, you know, when a file lands on my desk the following Monday morning, I didn't choose those charges. I can amend them. I can drop them, I can increase their severity, but I didn't pick them. In addition, and the guy was out the next morning part, the person who makes the initial bail decision in Virginia is the magistrate. The magistrate conducts an initial bail hearing based on the presentation the law enforcement officer makes and a quick run of the person's criminal history, basically their rap sheet. And then is not answerable to me, or for that matter, to anybody else for what their bail decision is. A judge can subsequently change that bail decision, but it's relatively uncommon. Sure. I wish they were elected.
Magistrates are elected.
Yeah, no, forgive the laugh. It's not at the question. It's at the absurdity of the answer, which is that magistrates are not elected. They are appointed. They are state functionaries, and they report to an arm of the Virginia Supreme Court in Richmond. One of the things, by the way, that I do as your Commonwealth's attorney, which is I regularly lobby in Richmond for either changes to the law to deal with absurdities, or to improve things, or to block changes to the law. I was in the General Assembly last session, and I will be in the General Assembly again this coming session to change the magistrate system. Currently, they are local, or they are appointed officials. They're not even required to be lawyers. 15 years ago when I started, they weren't even required to have a college education. You can have a high school degree and be a magistrate. And it's changed over the years who they report to. There's been a push-pull. Currently, they report to the Virginia Supreme Court, which is good in the sense that they are not politicized. It's bad in the sense that my 119 colleagues and I around Virginia and our police and sheriff's offices are being tied up in absolute knots, because there is a strong difference of opinion between us, who are criminal law specialists, and our magistrates over what probable cause means. And magistrates refusing to issue search warrants in very meritorious cases where we need evidence, or charging cases in certain ways that are just not the way that we would want them done. And it's very difficult to, the very process that was designed to insulate them from pressure means they're immune to pressure, even when they're not doing the right thing. And there was a bill this past session in the General Assembly to bring magistrates back under the supervision of circuit court judges, which they would favor, because even though it would make them less insulated, it was also make them less insulated. So they would be able, a circuit court judge could pick up the phone and say, I just had to issue this warrant that you refused to issue. Why did you deny this warrant? You have the Fourth Amendment wrong. So the magistrates make the initial charging decisions and the initial bail decisions. So as a corollary, I'm a big believer in no cash bail. There was actually a very interesting study that the Virginia Criminal Sentencing Commission just presented last week that you can look for on the website, or I'll give you my card and I can email it to you, that dealt with failures to appear and the like. But the overall empirical data shows that whether somebody pays a bail bondsman has effectively no bearing on whether they come to court, and it definitely doesn't have a bearing on whether at 3 o'clock in the morning they're deciding whether to shoot somebody. The only thing that cash bail does is impoverish people. They're either a danger or an unreasonable risk of flight and should be held, or they are not, and they should be released on conditions, but buying their way out. So if I got hemmed in as a teenager and my parents had to pay $10,000 cash to get me out, they probably would have paid it. Maybe they would have left me in there for a day. I hope they would have, but they would have paid it. But if you're a mentally ill homeless person and your cash bail is set at $100, which means you need to come up with $10 cash, somebody's already decided that you should be released, and you're going to wind up sitting. So that is not justice. But I have zero control over whether cash bail is set in Virginia. Because every bail decision that is not made by a magistrate is made by a judge, either at our recommendation that the judge follows, or over our objection, because the judge in our system of government is, and rightly should be, the final arbiter, and does believe in cash bail and will set cash bail. I also am not an investigator. I have the power to bring charges, drop charges, go to trial, not go to trial, make an offer. But I don't have an investigative arm. I rely on the Norfolk Police Department. They are not in my chain of command. I am not in theirs. We have a very close working relationship. I've had a good working relationship with both of our previous chiefs. By the way, my contacts from Hampton tell me that we have got an excellent chief in Chief Talbot. And they would be people who would be skeptical and would also tell me the straight story if they disagreed. but the police don't work for me. I don't work for them. I can't order them to do anything. It's very rare that we disagree on something, but they allocate their resources in a way that hopefully proceeds towards a common goal and usually does. But I do not have investigators independent of them. I have a single police detective who is detailed to my office, whose job is to serve subpoenas that for some reason didn't get done, until, after the point where a sheriff could serve them. So I am very much dependent on people to serve subpoenas, to procure witnesses to court, to plug holes that perhaps the intake division would have caught, but the magistrate, it wasn't part of their portfolio. So the most that I can do, for example, to get people to court is to issue an invitation, to jawbone, to ask for help from other agencies, and to hope that that is sufficient to get people there. I also do not control, in many ways, which cases go to trial. Obviously, I have the power to make offers, but the power to make offers is only as good as the strength of the evidence or the confidence that the average jury will find the evidence to be sufficient. To give you an example, one of the most difficult cases to prove and to sell to a jury is an acquaintance rape, a non-stranger sexual assault. The number of credible victims who the defense lawyer on the other side recognizes how difficult it is to get 12 people to agree unanimously that somebody short of a total stranger crawling through a window could commit a sexual assault. And we go to trial and the defendant is acquitted. It is not because of a lack of will or a lack of skill. Court is not an arm wrestling contest. It is a contest of both the strength of the evidence and the willingness of a community both to buy the evidence and to engage in the conceptual leaps necessary to arrive at guilty. It's also why, you'll look sometimes and go, what on earth happened there? That same community trust deficit, by the way, that leads people not to call the police in the first place. They're our neighbors too, and they sit on our juries too. And they don't trust the police or victims or us like they did 20 years ago when I started. The last thing that I will say about the things that are outside of my power, and then is a nod towards Richmond and then a nod towards y'all, is I have nothing to offer to witnesses who are intimidated. Nothing. Virginia had created a witness protection program in the mid-1990s. It was, if anybody is interested in the strange backstories of these things, it was created by the real-life FBI agent who was Donnie Brasco. He wound up being a state senator in Virginia and then wound up being Albemarle County Sheriff. And I called up my friend, who is now the most senior tenured prosecutor in Virginia, when I found out about this some years ago. And I said, his name's Don Caldwell, he's from Rona. I said, Don, so I just found this witness protection in the Virginia Code. What's the deal with this? And he said, oh yeah, bud, they passed that in the 1990s and they never put $1 into it. It just exists on paper. It's about 4 years ago. And I made it my personal mission to find a way to get witnesses protection. Because right now, when they call, I'm afraid. You're asking me to testify against my neighbor who shot my other neighbor. I know he's in jail. His entire family lives here. What are you going to do for me? And the answer is, well, we can send some extra police patrols around, which, by the way, extra convincing when we were down 250 officers. People wouldn't come to court. And without live witnesses in compliance with the 6th Amendment to the Constitution, cases get dropped. Starting about 2 years ago, I started bringing this up in our Prosecutors Association. I have put 2 op-eds in the Virginian Pilot, both with my good friend Steve Toscano, the Commonwealth's attorney in Fairfax, bringing attention to this. I was able to speak to Don Scott, the current House Minority Leader and a criminal defense lawyer. And last year, he put in a request to amend the Virginia budget to fund the Virginia Witness Protection Program at my request. It died a quick death in the House Courts of Justice Criminal Law Subcommittee last year. But this year, Don reintroduced it. And if we have a Virginia budget, there will be a Virginia Witness Protection Program. Both chambers put money in there. I guess both chambers could cut it out, but it looks like we will have it. And I don't expect it to be transformative, but I expect that when I can tell a witness, yes, I think I can pay for a security camera. You know, I can put you up in a hotel for a week. Or really the previous, the conversation one level upstream. It's really rare for someone to come and shoot at you. You don't have to worry about it. But in the unlikely event that something starts to brew, I have a program. It's not going to turn us into a utopia where we have no murders and everybody comes to court, but it will make a substantive difference. And it's something that I have lobbied for to try and deal with some of the powerlessness that I have. Nod to code enforcement. The city attorney's office handles code enforcement prosecutions. Part of the reason is that Virginia legislators for decades have felt that it is not sufficiently important to have a prosecutor assigned and available for every criminal case in Virginia. My mandate under the Virginia Code is that I must prosecute, and prosecute's a term of art. It means staff, evaluate, be present in court for, and see through felony cases. And it says, and I may, in my discretion, handle the prosecution of misdemeanors. And what legislators for decades have said is, well, you know, we're not making you do it, so we're not going to pay you to do it. And what that means is I don't have the prosecutors to do it. That means that, you know, in my office, I handle some misdemeanors. And that's not just here in Norfolk. My neighbor in Virginia Beach, my neighbor in Chesapeake, we're the same. So we have a different mix of cases we handle. But I handle selected misdemeanors. I handle, by the way, what this means. Richmond doesn't think it's important for you to have a prosecutor present for a DUID. They don't think it's important to have a prosecutor present for stalking. They don't think it's important to have a prosecutor present for domestic assault. They don't think it's important to have a prosecutor available for brandishing a firearm or for violating a protective order. They think all of these should just be a locality's responsibility. And they don't give you prosecutors for it, which means they don't give me prosecutors for it. So if you're wondering why, you know, poorly. Yes. Yes. I mean, what happens, let's say that, you know, your neighbor, you know, my neighbor punches me in the nose and I'm Joe Citizen. In a lot of localities, including here, because resources are not infinite, I as the victim will show up, you know, with or without a police officer, if a police officer responded, and it'll be me telling the judge. The judge will ask me some questions. The defendant will be entitled to a lawyer because it's a jailable offense. The defendant's lawyer will cross-examine me, beat me up with nobody to object. And the outcomes are not what the outcomes would be if there were a prosecutor there. And if that makes you mad, it should. Because I can tell you, I have friends who are general district court judges, misdemeanor judges, and they say, there is a movement, by the way, this fall for the first time in decades, a team effort where all of us 120 are going to be asking for funding to expand our mandate to require us to prosecute misdemeanors, to make Richmond pay us and give us the lawyers to be there for you on misdemeanors. But no, the end result is a lot of victims wind up not knowing they need to bring evidence, getting beaten up on the stand and turned around. The judges do a very good job with this. They do their best. Our district court judges do an excellent job in a bad situation. But the end result is, I've had district court judge friends say, I totally would have convicted that guy, you know, on this case that you weren't involved in, except victim didn't know to bring X or Y. So if you hear, you know, I went to court and somebody broke in my car and stole my stuff, and there wasn't anybody, it was just me there. It wasn't because of some sort of decision on the part of me, or for that matter, my friend Colin in Virginia Beach or Matt in Chesapeake, that we don't think that people breaking into cars are important. Oh, I had to say during one of my debates, it was actually one of my opponents said, well, I would expand our coverage to cover all misdemeanor cases. And I said, which murder victim's mother do you want me to tell that we bollocksed up her son's case? No, because we were handling misdemeanors, because that's literally what the answer would wind up being. Again, we do some. I get 2 federal government grant prosecutors to do domestic assault. The city out of my 39 gives me 5 lawyers. A lot of them are tied up on felonies, but they allow me to do brandishings, stalkings, concealed firearms cases, which are a leading indicator for homicide, by the way, and violations of protective order, the unlawful filming, all of the things that out of the basket of misdemeanors are frankly a lot more dangerous than a lot of felonies, you know, and are absolute public safety risks for if we just leave everybody their own devices. But the criminalization of poverty and mental illness is even more acute in the misdemeanor space. And there is absolutely no public safety reason why a prosecutor should have to wait for a misdemeanor to escalate his behavior into felonies for us for Richmond to think it's important enough for us to staff our cases. So that's the end of my lament for all the things that I'm not allowed to do. I've done what I could in a year and a half. No, I'm not going to be able to undo 400 years of history in 4 terms or in 4 years or in 40 years. I have made a difference. I have kept my promises not to jam people just to make people feel safer, because that actually makes people less safe. I've worked to use our resources to hold violent criminals accountable without causing everybody to suffer. You know, I've made as much lemonade with the lemons I've had. And I promise I'll keep doing it. We have 2 American justice systems. We will, unfortunately, for the foreseeable future, but I'll do everything I can to narrow that gap to make sure that the kids I saw in the Richmond City Jail and me, you know, and my sons, and the kids at Jaycox and Tidewater Park, you know, that all of us get the same fair shake. Forgive me for talking so long. If there are questions, happy to answer. If everybody wants to run out of here and go to bed, I totally understand.
So I have a personal interest in the mental health care realm. What power do you have to influence that realm? It's just that it's so broken. I don't even know where to start asking about that. It's pathetic. Speaking of magistrates.
I feel for you, and it is a broken system. Unfortunately, the origins of it go back into the 1960s, where John F. Kennedy had the excellent idea of shutting down large and centralized mental institutions and replacing them with a system of community mental health centers. Unfortunately, in the ensuing 15 to 20 years, what we saw was the shuttering of the large institutions and no effort to open the community mental health centers. And what we now have in Norfolk and in most of the country is that the largest mental hospital in any given locality is the jail. It's the jail. The proportion, I don't want to quote the number because I haven't looked it up recently and I fear getting it wrong, but the number of people with a DSM Axis 1 or 2 diagnosis in the Norfolk City Jail is absolutely horrifying. Now, I went to Eastern State Hospital a couple of months ago. Small group of prosecutors and I went and toured the place. And the news is not as dire as it was 15 years ago. Regrettably, it took the attempted murder and suicide of the son of a very esteemed senator whom I like and respect, you know, and for whom I really greatly feel, to draw some kind of attention to the crisis of mental health in Virginia. And we saw some relatively significant investments of money and time into the mental health system. We see it with the CHKD juvenile mental health facility that is opened up down the street. But the immense number of mentally ill people are still overwhelming the system. One of the things that I heard on the campaign trail from the police was, we have 6 or 7 officers sitting at Norfolk General on any given shift. Can you do anything, to get them out, because they're waiting on a bed in Stanton or in Manassas or somewhere, because by law it has to be a bed-to-bed transfer. And I told him, and I've followed through. Every time there's been a way to try and get police officers off of those duties, there's been a bill introduced. I've gone to Richmond, and I've lobbied for it, and they've all been killed. But the problem right now at Eastern State, for example, is that used to be a predominantly therapeutic hospital. It is now 97% forensic admissions. That means 97% admissions of people who came in through an arrest. And there's a lot of pressure on the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services to cycle people out as quickly as possible, because they're essentially in violation of the admissions laws for the people who are in on the back end. And there was a request to us as prosecutors, hey, can you move these misdemeanors out of here? And then I had to give them the "we're not on misdemeanors" sermon. And then also had to talk to them about the fact that one of the reasons they've seen an explosion in misdemeanor admissions is that back in my early days, 15 years ago, lawyers knew their clients were incompetent or were insane at the time of the offense when they committed their misdemeanor, but their misdemeanor was public defecation or disorderly conduct, and they would plead their clients to time served. That basically say, my client is clearly not guilty by reason of insanity, but he'll spend years in the system, so I'm just going to plead him, even though I know he's not competent or he's not able to do that. And they're, for a variety of reasons, they're I think, being more cognizant of their legal duty when they're dealing with a mentally ill client. So we're seeing more people go through the system, but we're going to need another 9-figure infusion of money to be able to help. And I would be am completely in favor of it, because right now what we see are mentally ill individuals not getting the services on the front end and then hurting somebody on the back end. And, a few of them wind up confined to a mental hospital. A lot of them wind up in that donut hole where they are mentally ill but not legally insane. And then they wind up going to prison. And that's not the way a just society treats its sick people.
Well, by the very nature of most mental illnesses, they can't and will not advocate for themselves.
Yes. Well, and that is one of the very difficult things about mental illness. And, I don't know of a single family that is untouched by mental illness, including mine. One of the great tragedies is that push-pull between the rights of an individual to control their own care and the necessity of treating an individual for an illness make it very difficult in the world of mental illness, because there are a lot of people who do very well in a therapeutic environment or when they are forcibly medicated. But the way that the current set of laws are set up and our cognizance of individual dignity means that we live in a world where a lot of people, once they stabilize, to the point where they stabilize to be sufficiently oriented, they can check themselves out. And then the cycle begins anew. And we need to have this is outside of my purview, because like a lot of prosecutors, I pick up the pieces. Whatever happens upstream is what results in somebody landing in my courtroom. But one of the things that we have to look at is how do we balance the interest of an individual and their personal autonomy and dignity with their potential, if they decompensate, to harm themselves or harm other people. And we had a homicide a couple of nights ago in Norfolk, and I don't want to talk about the details, but it's got mental illness written all over it. And in a different world with different resources, would it have happened?
Well, I think we're going to end on the interest of time, but I do very much appreciate you being here. And I did thank everyone else for coming tonight and for dialing in on Zoom. And I hope everyone, I'm sure I'll see you around the neighborhood, but I hope you have a good summer.
Thank you, everybody. Just let me filibuster you. No, that's fine. And the one thing, by the way,